A pregnant, brain-dead woman in Georgia was kept on life support. Emory Healthcare appears and their doctors appeared to have used this poor woman's case in order to fight the system and fight the law, even though it's clear as day that Georgia's heartbeat bill would not prevent this woman from being able to be taken off life support.
Biden administration grants. They're a recipient of the Biden Health and Human Services funding for clinics under pro-choice policies. They've partnered with Planned Parenthood Southeast. They partnered with them for training, research, and referrals. The Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation is a major abortion rights funder and has given grants that are affiliated with Emory.
Is this case never appeared in front of a judge. And the reason why it never appeared in front of the judge, in my opinion, is the fact that any judge would have looked at the law and said, we cannot compel this family or these hospitals or these doctors to keep this woman on life support. I'm going to set the stage here for this conversation. There's an article from ABC News by Mary Kekatos. A pregnant, brain-dead woman in Georgia was kept on life support. Experts say it raises ethical and legal questions. Adriana Smith, a 31-year-old Georgia nurse and mother, was just 8 weeks pregnant when she was declared brain dead in February after suffering a medical condition. However, the family claims the hospital told them legally she had to be kept on life support to allow the fetus to grow. The family claims doctors told them that they were not legally allowed to consider other options, according to local Atlanta station 11 Alive. Last week, Smith's baby was born by emergency cesarean section, weighing under 2 pounds and needing care in the neonatal intensive care unit, reported 11 Alive. Smith's family did not respond to ABC News' request for comment. In a statement to ABC News, Emory Healthcare, the healthcare system Emory hospitals fall under, said its staff makes medical recommendations for patients using many factors. The top priorities at Emory Healthcare continue to be the safety and well-being of the patients and families we serve. Emory Healthcare uses consensus from clinical experts, medical literature, and legal guidance to support our providers as they make medical recommendations, the statement read. Emory Healthcare is legally required to maintain the confidentiality of the protected health information of our patients, which is why we are unable to comment on the individual matters and circumstances. The case has captured national attention and raised numerous legal and ethical questions about medical consent. Who should get to make decisions for permanently incapacitated people, especially when pregnant, and whether abortion laws are further complicating pregnancy care. This is a case that reflects the confusion in the post-Dobbs era. Michelle Goodwin, the O'Neill Professor of Constitutional Law and Global Health Policy at Georgetown Law, told ABC News, referencing the Supreme Court decision that resulted in the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Because the hospital believed that it could not allow the brain-dead woman to simply be deceased because the state has a very strict abortion law. They believed that they needed to do all matters possible to keep the fetus alive. All right. Now I'm gonna flip over here to the Georgia House Bill 481, which was passed back a couple years ago.
This also the Living Infants Fairness and Equality Act, or also known culturally as the Georgia Heartbeat Bill?
Yes, this is the Georgia Heartbeat Bill. This is the Living Infants Fairness and Equality Act. All right. So Section 2 of this act basically says, wait, we need to go down to Section 3. Sorry. Section 3, 63B was amended. Natural persons means any human being, including an unborn child. D, unless otherwise provided by law, any natural person, including an unborn child with a detectable human heartbeat, shall be included in population-based determinations. As used in this code section, the term detectable human heartbeat means embryonic or fetal cardiac activity or the steady and repetitive rhythmic contraction of the heart within the gestational sac. Unborn child means a member of the species of Homo sapiens at any stage of development who is carried in the womb. If we go down to Section 4, as used in the article, the term abortion means the act of using, prescribing, or administering any instrument, substance, device, or other means with the purpose of to terminate a pregnancy with knowledge that termination will, with reasonable likelihood, cause the death of an unborn child, provided, however, that any such act shall not be considered an abortion if the act is performed with the purpose of removing a dead unborn child caused by spontaneous abortion or removing an ectopic pregnancy. detectable human heartbeat means embryonic or fetal cardiac, will purposefully engage in conduct which she intends to result in her death or in substantial or irreversible physical impairment of a major bodily function. Medical futile means in reasonable medical judgment, an unborn child has a profound and irremediable congenital or chromosomal anomaly that is incompatible with sustaining life after birth. Spontaneous abortion means the naturally occurring death of an unborn child, including a miscarriage or stillbirth. So if we go through this, we don't see anything in regards to mom's life, basically using mom as a human incubator. So I'll give my here little 2 cents really quickly, the nice controversial 2 cents. Emory Healthcare appears and their doctors appeared to have used this poor woman's case in order to fight the system and fight the law, even though it's clear as day that Georgia's heartbeat bill would not prevent this woman from being able to be taken off life support. I think they had a very far reach in order to try to create chaos, in order to try to capture the news cycle, in order to bring and capture doubt and portray doubt on Georgia's heartbeat bill and what's being debated in many other states around the country. I think this is nothing but a political move, and man, I wish that this lady could have rested in peace. Now, I am grateful that her baby is alive. I'm grateful that her baby is doing well, but the family should have had this choice, and this woman should not have been used as a political pawn.
Well, Emory Healthcare had to leap over a really large information gap, which is the baby's heart and body is separate and independent of the mother's heart and body. Understandably, at that time of pregnancy, yes, the baby is being housed by the mother. But to your point, Jason, the bill doesn't prevent the woman from being removed off child support. How many months pregnant was the mother at the moment?
8.
Easily have induced labor all day long.
8 weeks or 8 months?
8 weeks.
Oh,
Weeks.
forgive me. Never
They
mind.
said the baby was born at like 2 pounds, 1
Yeah.
ounce or something.
I thought you were
8 weeks. This baby is, for all intents and purposes, not viable without the mother.
That is true.
At 8 weeks.
That is true. I thought you were saying 8 months.
Not viable, which many laws have looked at a 15-week ban on abortion, not necessarily a heartbeat ban, because we can actually tell heartbeats as early as 7 weeks in a lot of cases, sometimes earlier.
I think it probably considered. So it was a car accident or something that took her out, or
We don't know that information.
So I don't have all the information. I don't know. That it's kind of like trying to put together a puzzle, a 4,000 piece puzzle with 4 main pieces here. I think it's one of those political things where they didn't want to race the good tragedy to reinforce some BS cause or to facilitate it into reinforcing their stances of some kind of garbage. I also, same thing. I'm glad the baby's alive. Hopefully, it doesn't have any permanent medical deficiencies, conditions, because we all know what lungs and eyes, as far as things you need every day, are the last 2 things to go or to be developed, right? So those are the last 2. So those always make it hard to see, hard to breathe. So hopefully the baby grows out of that. Sometimes that's what happens when they're born premature, but it should have probably been up to the family, or at least like the father saying something, or whoever the husband or the male was, or the boyfriend or the dad to the kid. And they should have had a lot more say than just a hospital just doing whatever they wanted to do to angle and leverage some kind of weird gains towards them.
But they could have still honored the heartbeat bill by allowing the mother to pass away of natural causes. They're not conducting an abortion. They're allowing the mother to enter into her rest because she's being supported artificially by this life-sustaining medical equipment that's only been available to us probably the last 20, 30 years. So she dies. The baby would probably naturally pass with the mother. The heartbeat bill has been honored, has it not?
Yeah, it's not an abortion.
It's not an abortion, is my point.
It's not an abortion. I mean, the stretch that they have to get to this point where they forced this family to keep this woman alive in order to fall in line with this law is complete and utter.
Who's
like
in charge of Emory?
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
By the way, the woman, while we don't know the exact cause, she was declared brain dead on February 19th after showing multiple blood clots in her brain. Newkirk said Smith's boyfriend woke up to her daughter gasping for air, and she was taken to Emory, and then Emory University Hospital, where a CT scan showed multiple blood clots in her brain.
Okay.
Well, typically these hospitals are extensions of the universities, and historically these large universities are funded by endowments, and this money generally comes from left-leaning anti-life groups. It would be my guess. Would you agree with that, Jason, that a lot of left-leaning policy and agenda going on over there?
This seems like this was an excellent opportunity for somebody that had an issue with this bill to simply try to create and use this woman as a political pawn.
Absolutely.
In the system.
It was politicized.
I mean, it's clear as day that this is not at all. You can't look at the Georgia heartbeat bill and the Georgia heartbeat law and claim that this woman had to be kept alive for the purpose of sustaining this baby's life.
No, and it's typical leftist behavior of always finding the exception, always using the extreme 1 in a million event and using it as the Trojan horse to tear down the entire spirit of the Georgia heartbeat bill. The Georgia heartbeat bill, let's remind our viewers, was set in law with the spirit of protecting life. We needed to establish and define where does life begin, and what was something that was going to be difficult to argue against was a human being with a heartbeat. You could not fathom executing a human knowing that it had a heartbeat. So we were protecting life, and these people, like, they don't let any good disaster go to waste. You know, it's their modus operandi.
Yeah, they always angle it and leverage it.
Well, and they did in the Georgia bill, they did put the exception for rape and incest. I mean, they put much of what the left had issue with. They put into this bill. I mean, this is a bill that crossed party lines in a lot of ways.
Yeah, when you read it, it said too for like medical things too, if someone's going to expire and all that. So yeah, they covered all the bases. It
was passed, and Democrats passed it. And they're trying to take.
Well, Democrats didn't pass it. I mean, the Republicans passed it.
They needed Democrat votes, is what I'm saying.
I don't think that they did in Georgia.
In Georgia, they didn't even need Democrats to vote.
They did not need a Georgia.
Then why did we put these provisions for rape and incest? Because those kids deserve to live too.
Why did we put the provisions? We put the provisions because there's still a ton of Republican lawmakers that demand that these provisions be put in.
Well, shame on the Republicans.
I mean, 100% shame on the Republicans, but they're all over the place. I mean, this is not a. If this were to take place in the U.S. House right now and that provision didn't exist, you would have a ton of Republican lawmakers that did not vote in favor of the bill.
So what is the state said then on this topic? And who's the doctor that said they had to do this? And I'm only asking because we don't think it should have been politicized like it is. That's pretty filthy and disgusting and very disrespectful in my perception. But who's the doctor that was like, you have to do this because of this? And then what did Georgia, as the state representative, the governor, whoever it is, the medical, whatever it is that's in charge of all that part, have to say about this or anything?
So I've read you the statement. They did not give specifics to this case.
Yeah.
They used HIPAA as an excuse to not talk specifically about this case. They didn't even really address the fact of how they believe that it contradicted or was in part because of the law. They didn't make a statement in regards to that. They made a blanket statement that said that their team of legal and medical experts made this decision. The decision was wrong. I mean, I could tell you that this is also speaks to a broader issue on life. I could tell you that if my wife were in this situation, that she would want me to do whatever's possible to keep the baby alive, I believe. And I think, Aaron, your wife would probably be in the same boat.
Absolutely.
Now, it's great that we have medical technology that's able to render that possible. But at the same time, when you look at a family that goes, we don't care about the baby's life, which I think that's wrong to say because we don't actually know whether or not this family, what their choice was. Their whole point was they should have had the ability to make the choice. which I agree with. But in terms of the broader population, we've convinced an entire group of people that life is not important. And they can't even classify when life begins. I mean, if you talk to some of these people, it's not just when the baby's born. Well, the baby has to have cognitive and reasoning functions. So what, we can kill a baby up to 3 years old, 5 years old? Like, you can't even give me a point. A lot of these people are so extreme.
I always thought that was obscure. Like in space, they'll be like, "Oh, we found life on other, celestial objects." It's like microbes, but they'll be like, "It's definitively life." And then with like babies, they're like, "Well, I don't know if it's life." And you're like, "What?
It has legs.
Which science are we following here, you guys?" Come on.
It's also important to understand. Did you want to say something, Jason? It's also important to understand that this is part of a greater national battle that's taking place post Roe. Ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned, we've had multiple states with active heartbeat bans. Georgia has a Life Act, which we were discussing today, but Ohio, South Carolina, Iowa, Tennessee, these are in contestment. Like, for example, in states with heartbeat laws that are temporarily blocked pending legal challenges. We see that in Texas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Dakota. And there's states that have passed heartbeat bills but are not currently enforcing them due to court orders or political shifts. That includes Alabama, Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and West Virginia. And all those states, the Alabamas, Arkansas, Missouris, Oklahomas, and West Virginias, they have a total ban in effect, but they're not being enforced. So the picture I'm trying to paint right now is that this has been a trend on the side of life, and the enemies of life are working overtime to stop this. These other states are not enforcing them. Things are getting challenged in courts. Now we have this national news story in Georgia. You guys, this has been a generational fight, and the fight continues. We're fighting for life.
I mean, let's read through these article headlines here, because shame on journalism today, which, trust me, I credit journalism when they do it right, but here's examples of when they do it wrong. Newsweek: abortion law forces doctors to keep pregnant brain-dead woman alive. ABC News: a pregnant brain-dead woman in Georgia was kept on life support. Experts say it raises ethical legal questions. The ethical question behind Georgia's heartbeat bill: brain-dead woman gives birth, taken off life support, from Yahoo. Democracy Now: Georgia abortion ban forces family to keep pregnant brain-dead woman on life support. NBC News: pregnant woman declared brain dead is being kept alive due to Georgia's heartbeat law. Georgia abortions ban forces family to keep woman declared brain dead on life support, from Truth Out. I mean, this is an example of nobody's asking the question, did Emory screw up in their interpretation of this law? Which is really the question of the day, is, did Emory overstep in terms of their interpretation of the law? And I believe 100% they did, because I've read the law and I've read the story, and it's clear as day that nowhere in the law does it require this woman to be kept alive.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think they very much overstep, but I think there's another facet to this that nobody's thinking about or addressing. I think, because you always hear them, "Oh, abortions, you can't do it, da-da-da." The for abortion or against abortion, that never seems to tackle the real issue, and that's the subpar, loose leg kind of antics and behavior of subpar culture of just out getting pregnant and not being more respectable as a community, whether you're a man or a woman or not, or whatever. And there is only two damn genders, so there you go. But it does, none of this stuff ever actually addresses the part of, like, look, don't just be out there sleeping all willy-nilly with a bunch of ding-dongs and getting pregnant and then going, "Oh my God, I regret it, I need an abortion." So that's always been my problem with any of these laws. It never addresses the moral aspect of just being a decent human being or striving towards it. Instead, it's always, "Oh, here's the topic." And I don't think it really addresses the real issue of the moral aspect of society, of just being real loose-legged, I guess, is the best.
So for the purpose of this,
I mean,
it does not appear that this woman just didn't want the baby at the time. I just want to make it clear.
Oh yeah, that,
we are honoring this woman in the best way possible and honoring this family in the best way possible amidst this extremely important dialogue and this very controversial dialogue. I don't want to not honor this woman who lost her life, the family, and the challenges that they're going to face with this baby.
Not talking about her.
Yes, specifically. Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
But I do think that that is a conversation that we need to have on the broader culture, and the fact that back in the 70s and where we've gotten to now when it comes to the idea of sex and sex in the classroom and sexual education and just the lack of teaching our kids to be responsible, that is an issue. I don't know if that's an issue that was ever at play in this case. I just want to make that really clear so that we don't, run into some hurdles with the way that we're reporting this story.
It's not what I was intending. I just was going on with all the laws and stuff with it because everybody's like, we need these laws. And I was like, how come we're not just better people? How come we're not just a better society? Why don't we have better morals? Why isn't it a little more sacred being, who you're going to be intimate with and stuff? Why isn't this because to me, that's more solving the issue versus just throwing Band-Aids at it, at a bunch of, cancers and wounds. You can't throw aspirin at cancer and go, oh, it'll get better.
Well, the base point of our show is biblical morality. So if we're following biblical morality, we have men and women getting married, having children in the context of love and within the institution of marriage. So that solves pretty much 98% of the problems, right? After that. And so if we have a biblically moral society, we're not having these conversations. But what we should be looking at is, where does Emory Health get their funding from? And when we talk about Emory Health, it's like this sort of this idea of like, well, there's people behind it and people have agendas and people have interests. So Emory actually gets a lot of money from federal and state government programs, Medicaid Title X, which funds family planning services, including contraception. They get money from the NIH and CDC grants, support reproductive health research, Biden administration grants. They're a recipient of the Biden Health and Human Services funding for clinics under pro-choice policies. They've partnered with Planned Parenthood Southeast. They partnered with them for training, research, and referrals. The Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation is a major abortion rights funder and has given grants that are affiliated with Emory. The Guttmacher Institute Research Collaboration. I can go on and on. They get money from the ACLU. They allegedly get money from Pfizer and Merck. So this is not surprising to find out that they're working as what I would consider political activists. They're not being responsible healthcare providers because look who they're in bed with.
It's really important to note, because in several of these cases where somebody's being kept on life support, it often ends up in a judge's courtroom. And what's crazy to me is this case never appeared in front of a judge. And the reason why it never appeared in front of the judge, in my opinion, is the fact that any judge would have looked at the law and said, we cannot compel this family or these hospitals or these doctors to keep this woman on life support. I think that's what the court would have ruled. And so there's a reason why they did not take this in front of a judge, because at any given point, they could have had a court hearing within the week, if not the next day, to determine what happened to this young lady, to Adriana Smith. It was never taken in front of the courts, and I think it's because they knew that the courts would rule that they could not compel the hospital to keep this woman alive.
So in other words, they felt they had a better shot using the court of public opinion.
They just made a statement. And maybe the family was not aware of their legal options, which would be even more concerning if the hospital did not make the family aware of the options that they had to contest the decision, because all these decisions are contestable. This could have ended up in front of a judge, and it didn't. And I think it would be one situation if there was a judicial ruling on this matter and quote unquote a precedent set, but there wasn't. It was a couple doctors and a couple attorneys, probably with some other interests in their head, that use this woman as political pawn.
Well, the lawsuit's going to be so wild that this woman's name is Adriana Smith. It's not going to be Emory Healthcare. It's going to be Smith Healthcare when the attorneys are done with this case. Do you think
this isn't a testament? This is definitely a case.
If there's a lawsuit.
But the lawsuit would seem pretty juicy.
If there's a lawsuit, and I hope that this family understands that they have the ability to fight this legally. And the fact that we're not seeing a ruling on this is very concerning, because this should go through the court system. the judge should rule in this and say, look, you overstepped. This is not what the law says. Let's get clarification on this law with judicial precedent. That's not what's taking place, because I know that they know, deep down, they know they would lose that case, because there's no way any judge would look at this law and say that this law gives them the ability to compel this hospital and this family to keep this woman on life support.
I'm surprised there's no ambulance chasing lawyer trying to pick it up real quick and get something going on, to be honest. But this is a testament to how how big and overreaching a lot of hospital stuff is. If you guys have all been to the hospital, sometimes they just start doing stuff or telling you have to do this or have to do that, or if you don't like something or get uncomfortable, I mean, they'll call security on you in a heartbeat. I mean, they have a lot of authority and stuff, or try to at least present like they do, and they can do whatever they want. If you've ever been to the hospital, they get a little extra sometimes with stuff. So this is definitely a case of that, showing that they think they can just do whatever they want and have you do, if you're in their care, whatever, or any of your family members are, whatever they want to do. It just takes precedent over anything that you want to do with yourself or your family.
Yeah, and I think this becomes a really good advertisement for making sure that we have living wills and testaments. In terms of what do we do with end-of-life care? How do we want to be treated in end-of-life care? I think that's very important, especially if you're listening on and you haven't done that, or you haven't discussed with your loved ones what you want in certain circumstances, whether it be organ donations, etc. Like, having those conversations with your loved ones is really crucial. Obviously, we don't know the ins and outs of this case, so we don't know whether or not Adriana had those conversations with her family. But this definitely gives way to how do you want your life to go at the end of life?
Well, I think if this were to go to the courts, it would affirm autonomy, bodily autonomy. The baby is separate from the mother. So in the court case, I would imagine that the judge would look at this and say, the mother passed away of natural death. The hospital doesn't have an obligation to keep the baby alive. It's the natural order. The baby dies with the mother. Unfortunately, this is one of those rare circumstances that that's going to happen. We can't expect to act like God. We need to let God be God. He is the author of life. He gives life. He takes away life. Who are we to intervene? We allow the woman to die of natural causes. Then the baby would die. There would be it would be very clear to the courts and to the public that the baby also had to die of natural causes. This was not an abortion, like we stated earlier. Period.
All right, we're going to take a brief time out. When we come back, we're going to redirect the conversation a little bit. Hang with us. Don't go anywhere. Wisconsin Supreme Court decides abortion case that prompted most expensive judicial election in U.S. history. This published yesterday. Brianna Depeche. Published on July 2nd. The Wisconsin Supreme Court's newly elected liberal majority on Wednesday voted to strike down a near total state abortion ban, voting 4-3 to overturn the stringent 176-year-old law. The decision reflected a deeply partisan split, with all 4 liberal justices voting to invalidate the 1849 abortion law and the 3 conservative justices dissenting. It also crystallized the impact of the state's Supreme Court election earlier this year that raked in millions of dollars in donations, the highest amount in U.S. history for a judicial race. It included involvement from the then Trump ally Elon Musk, former President Barack Obama, and others. Writing for the majority, Justice Rebecca Dallett said the law had been superseded by more recent precedent, including a 1985 statute that allowed for abortions up to the point of fetal viability, or around the 20-week mark. We conclude that the comprehensive legislation enacted over the last 50 years, regulating in detail the who, what, where, when, and how of abortion, so thoroughly covers the entire subject of abortion that it was meant as a substitute for the 19th century near total ban on abortion, Dallett wrote. Conservative Justice Annette Ziegler, in a dissent, described the rulings as a jaw-dropping exercise of judicial will and charged that the liberal justices ruled on the matter based on their personal preferences. The 1849 law, an effort to revive it, came to the fore in Wisconsin in 2022 after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled to overturn Roe v. Wade, effectively snapping back into place the state law that had been dormant for decades. The Wisconsin law made it a felony for individuals in Wisconsin to perform abortions, including when the health of the woman was at risk, and without exceptions in cases of rape and incest. Though the law was not enforced by the state in recent years, at least some Republicans had urged the state Supreme Court to keep it in place, prompting opponents to push more urgently for it to be struck down. 4-3 decision puts the rest the possibility that it could be revived. It's also the clearest sign and date of the impact that liberals on the bench could have after they regain the court majority in 2023 for the first time in 15 years. The closely watched state Supreme Court race in Wisconsin was the most expensive judicial election in U.S. history, attracting more than $100 million in donations and far eclipsing the $56 million spent on the state Supreme Court race just 2 years earlier, according to figures compiled by the Brennan Center for Justice. This an article from Fox News by Brianna Depeche.
You get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. I mean, they paid for an overturn of the 1849 abortion ban, and they got what they wanted on their Amazon list. Was it you, Jason, that said after Roe v. Wade was overturned that we, the pro-life movement, we, the church, didn't win anything?
Yeah, I've said it a lot. I mean, there was this huge victory, like a pro-life win, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, mostly because I think that the vast majority of the pro-life voting public believed that all of a sudden abortion was going to become illegal. What all it did was it gave the right of abortion and the law back to the states. It became a states' rights issue again for the states to determine how they wanted to go about it. What it did was it spurred a new industry of abortion tourism. And we've seen that in the state of Colorado, where women from across the border in neighboring states like Oklahoma, which isn't really neighboring, but pretty neighboring, Texas, those individuals are coming across the state lines to places like New Mexico and Colorado to receive their abortions, sometimes up to birth in the state of Colorado. So this Wisconsin Supreme Court race was huge, considering that they knew that this was one of the hot topic issues that was sitting on the bench waiting for a ruling. And so that's why this spurred $100 million in a Supreme Court race in Wisconsin, trying to set precedent for the rest of the nation as well. What's really interesting, we talked about earlier on the show, was some of the statutes that exclude rape and incest. And I think that's a really important conversation to be had, because the American public has been sold this bucket of lies that it's better that these babies be aborted in cases of rape and incest, when really we know from a ton of research that psychologically it does more harm to the mother to abort that baby than it does to keep it.
Well, going back to what Lila Rose has been famously saying for years in the context of rape, the baby shouldn't receive the punishment for the sins of their father. You know, that baby deserves to live, and as difficult and as hard as that circumstance is, and of course that's the circumstance that's constantly being parroted by the anti-life left, that, oh, well, these lives don't matter because of the context of it. Well, what if a flower grows from the concrete? You know, I mean, tell that to the dozens of pro-life activists who said, my father raped my mother and I deserve to live. Would you kill me now? You know, they're in your face and looking you in the camera and asking that, would you kill me now? So yes, those lives do matter. But going back a little bit to Wisconsin, I would blame Milwaukee. I would blame Madison. I would blame Green Bay, because just like the rest of the country, you have these concentration of urban metropolitan centers that are flooded with propaganda, and they attract, you know, a lot of the degenerate people, and they go in and they swing these congressional districts and all the gerrymandering and all the malarkey that goes on with politics, and aids and abets and these types of political wins. So yeah, we need to change the culture. If the great people of Milwaukee and Madison and Green Bay ascribe to biblical morality, it wouldn't matter how much money that was spent on these Supreme Court races. The people's will would have been done. It's the same reason why we just got done talking about Georgia having a heartbeat bill, because that's the Bible Belt. Clearly, even though you got Atlanta and these major cities in Georgia, you still have a strong contingent of Bible-believing people who stand on the side of life. So we got to change the culture.
So it brings me back to John 9, starting in verse 1. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sin? It was not because of his sins or his parents' sin, Jesus answered. This happened so that the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the task assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. Then he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and other who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, he just looks like him. But the beggar kept saying, yes, I am the same one. They asked, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and washed, and now I can see. Where is he now? They asked. I don't know, he replied. Then they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud and healed him. The Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, he put the mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see. I mean, when we start talking about the sins of the Father, we know with Jesus' new covenant that all of this hurt, all of this pain is ultimately for whose glory? It's for God's glory. And to abort this baby and treat it like it shouldn't be there because of a case of rape takes away the power of what Christ can do in the lives of these mothers and of these children.
Tim Tebow was supposed to be killed. His mother was pregnant in the Philippines. They were doing missionary work, and they were encouraged to abort Tim. And because the mother was a Bible-believing Christian, she goes, absolutely not. I'm going to have my son. You know, Tim Tebow isn't any better than anybody of us here or those listening, but I just use him as an example because the culture and the world tends to attribute value depending on your status in the world. I think Tim Tebow is a great example of somebody who deserves to live. I mean, we all deserve to live. It's just reminding people that God is going to take what the enemy meant for evil and redeem it and get all of the glory. You know, Tim Tebow was allowed to live, and then, you know, fast forward to, 20 some years later, he's showing John 3:16 to millions of Saturday college football fans, and he's in the end zone praying and invoking the Lord on a national stage. And this was a guy that was supposed to be killed.
All I got to say with it is we wouldn't be having a rape or an incest conversation if we actually punished rapists and pedophiles and all the problems that I absolutely despise and hate. There would probably be a lot less of it. It wouldn't be a talk of abortion or don't abort. So that's my take on it with most of it, is that if we started punishing and not protecting real violent, terrible, disgusting, unacceptable issues, it would be a better world. Or wouldn't we even having these kind of conversations at this point in time right now if we were a much better morally directed just society, a community that didn't tolerate this kind of crap or make excuses for rapists or pedophiles or traffickers or any of these things. These wouldn't be the topics at hand. It wouldn't be a law about all this stuff. You know,
The Bible teaches young men to crucify their flesh and direct their sexual energy in a moral way. It's not about getting rid of it. It's about controlling it. And we live and young men are in a world awash with indulge yourself, be completely hedonistic. Hedonism is the cultural way forward today. And so we're going to always see rape if we tell young men they should be able to indulge their sexual drives however they so fit.
Yeah, and I think we saw that with some of the case out of the Diddy case. I mean, to change topics a little bit,
Talk
right?
about Diddy.
Diddy only convicted on 2 of the 5 charges, which was prostitution. He was let go of the RICO charge, and he was let out on the case of trafficking. Basically, it was just he was charged with the fact that he had driven these women, had transported these women to have sex for money. That's what he got charged on. He could end up with prison time, but he could also end up with parole.
But isn't there a litany of civil lawsuits lined up against him?
Probably.
So
yeah, but it's the same thing. Oh, look, I'm some station of privilege and some nickels and change and yada yada and notoriety, and this person knows me and that person knows me, so I'll just get away with being a disgusting creature and not even a human being, and just walk. So people like me go, I have no faith in the justice or legal system, let alone the establishment or the government as a whole, because they just let him just cruise through.
We would be, if we were talking about rape, I don't know if this is the direction we wanted this conversation to go, but I want to say that there's a direct correlation between the level of pornography in society and rape cases. And so if we were to eliminate and make pornography illegal, if we brought back decency laws, once again, if we ascribe to a moral code, biblical moral code, we would get rid of the pornography and probably lessen all these cases of incest and rape.
So 50 Cent says, Diddy beat the Rico. That boy a bad man. He like the gay John Gotti.
50, a.k.a. Ferrari.
I mean, the fact that we're celebrating Diddy getting off
I'm not celebrating it.
I mean, but the fact that some of these guys are celebrating that Diddy got off is like a great indication of where our culture currently sits.
Yeah, well, hip-hop is rotten to the core now that you got Lil Yachty promoting homosexuality.
Rosie O'Donnell shared on Instagram, guess a jury just never wants to believe that a woman stays because of power and coercion. Wow. They just think women stay because what? Money? Fame? They love the abuse? What a effing joke. This decision got me angry. So Rosie O'Donnell's angry.
Am I allowed to agree with Rosie O'Donnell on YouTube?
This will be the first time I think I've agreed with Rosie O'Donnell.
I think so.
Yeah.
Ireland's been good.
I'll give it. The old heifer had a good point this time.
Every once in a while, we agree with some crazy people. I mean, I remember I was debating at Prop 131. I was using quotes from the NAACP. I thought never in my life would I ever quote the NAACP for political purposes, but I did.
Yeah, Rosie O'Donnell had a good point for once. You better be careful. She's going to be on The View next week or something.
So Hannah Sachs from People says Lily Allen says she can't remember how many abortions she had. Lily Allen says she can't remember how many abortions she had. On an episode of her podcast, Miss Me, the British singer 40 shared that she used to get pregnant all the time and know that she's had several abortions. Abortions, I've had a few, but then again, I can't remember exactly how many. I think maybe I want to say 4 or 5, Allen said as her co-host Makita Oliver added that she's also had about 5. She recalled one of her experiences. Allen said, I remember once getting pregnant and the man paying for my abortion and me thinking it was so romantic.
Wow, you laugh or you cry?
However, now that she's had some space from the experience, Allen shared that her opinion has changed. I don't think it's generous or romantic, the singer said, and explained that the man never followed up with her afterwards. Allen shares daughters Marnie Rose and Ethel Mary with ex-husband Sam Cooper. She and Cooper also had a son, George, who was stillborn in 2010. Back in February, multiple sources confirmed to People that the Smile singer and her Stranger Thing actor David Harbour had separated after more than 4 years of marriage. She's devastated, not in a good place, an insider told People of Allen at the time. They also shared the split from Harbour has been very hard for her and her girls. It's been a bad start to the year, but Lily is tough, the insider added. She's very good at prioritizing herself when she has to.
I don't even know if we're talking about abortion, we're talking about Wisconsin, we're talking about Diddy and baby oil. What are we talking about here?
We're talking about the culture as a broader topic, I think, is where we've taken this. I mean, we're looking at Georgia and this political pawn that they created. Then we're talking about Wisconsin overturning a 150-year-old law, basically banning abortion. And now we're looking at the broader implications of what Jim was implying earlier about being loose-legged and the fact that we're treating abortion as birth control in many cases. And now we've brought in a example of a podcast where, they're joking about how many abortions that they've had. Now, luckily, Lily Allen did say that she's rethought some of this stuff and doesn't think it's generous or romantic anymore. But the idea that Allen remembers once getting pregnant and thinking that her man paying for the abortion was romantic is a broader implication of what we've raised these young ladies to believe and what we've raised this culture to believe.
It's showing she has very low morals, values, and ethics. She has very low self-worth if that's romantic to her. She wasn't around good people or raised or shown things in a good fashion by any means. I mean, he paid for an abortion, so that's romantic. She sounds terrible. I will congratulate her on sounding like she's morally maturing after some time going, maybe it wasn't a good thing. Going, all right, at least you're thinking for yourself once instead of just being like every other idiot.
Well, what we're contending for is the sanctity of life. This is a battle of culture, and the culture is fighting whether life is invaluable or valuable. And we stand here as Bible believing Christians that life is sacred. God is the only one that can give and take away. And it's measurable, it's statistical. Women suffer from abortions, and that aspect is never discussed. The psychological and emotional harm, there's this idea of post abortion syndrome that includes depression, anxiety, and guilt. You talk to women, you look at the secular studies 20, 30 years later, they're asking if you could do it all over again, would you? And they'd say, no, I wish I would have just had the baby. These women that get abortions measurably and statistically have an increased substance abuse issue. And then you get into the physical risks and complications, the immediate dangers of abortion. They risk hemorrhaging, infections, uterine protection, death. There's long-term health effects, increased risk of preterm birth and future pregnancies, infertility, pelvic inflammatory diseases. And interestingly, the Black Lives Matter crowd never talk about this, but abortion inordinately affects Black women more than any other group in this country. And it's an absolute genocide on the Black community, abortion. They put Planned Parenthood centers directly in concentrated Black neighborhoods. It's an absolute genocide that's taking place. And then the societal and moral consequences of abortion. Abortion enables irresponsible men to avoid responsibility. Men are encouraged to live this way because there's this plan B, no pun intended, the erosion of maternal bonds. Society just is hardening against motherhood and marriage. Sex is being defined as transactional and recreational, not a holy and sacred covenant that, God has ordained. And we're seeing, demographic declines. The abortion is targeting minorities, poor communities. And then the fact that it's just a sin, it's a mortal sin. God talks about, thou shalt not kill. And it's very clear. So, yeah, we are very pro-life here on Spiritual Insurgency.
I mean, imagine how many of these social issues we wouldn't have if we all had the same understanding that we are all fearfully and wonderfully made from the time of inception, knitted together by God in our mother's womb for His divine purpose. I mean, what we've told these kids when it comes to the transgender issue is you are not good enough in your own body until you get the sex change. That's not going along with you are fearfully, wonderfully made, woven together for God's divine purpose in your mother's womb. Before you were even born, you were known. You were known by a creator. You would eliminate the transgender issue.
Psalms 139 says, your eyes saw my unformed body. His eyes saw your unformed body. God looks upon these children. For those that don't have the fear of God, and I'm sorry if I cut you off, Jason, but life is my number one issue. Like I've always said this, we could talk about economy all day. We could talk about immigration all day, but our base point, our foundation has to be valuing the sanctity of life. Because if we as a culture disregard life as not sacred, everything is off the table. Everything. I don't want to have a conversation about trickle-down economics with you if you want to murder babies. I don't want to have a conversation with you about, H-1 visas and what policy we should have at the southern border if we're butchering God's children. This is the mountain that we die on, church.
And if we shouted this from the rooftop, if we shouted this understanding that you're fearfully and wonderfully made, we would eliminate these issues.
Yes.
But the church has failed to make everybody known how important they are and how they are crafted before birth with the divine purpose. They failed to teach that. We failed to tell kids at a young age that they matter, that they are perfect the way that they are. And instead, we try to craft them into something else. And now we have this issue where they think that they're dogs, where they think they're cats, where they want to be the opposite gender, where they, the list goes on.
And we're having an ideological conversation, but I think a statistical one is even better to prove Jason's point. Shout out to Save the Storks. They send these vans in front of abortion centers, buses in front of abortion centers, where they take what is it when you take a picture, a sonogram?
Ultrasound.
Ultrasound of the baby, And the overwhelming majority of the women that go to have an abortion, that get to have a sonogram and see their baby, I wish I had the numbers at the tip of my fingers, but I can tell you that an overwhelming majority of these young women choose not to have the abortion once they see their baby. It becomes
Because they've psychologically humanized it, which brings forth the true value of the aspect upon it. Look, I differentiate you on a few things.
okay.
You're like all about life. I'm like, no, let's give the death penalty to rapists, pedos, sex traffickers. I don't think they have any value. We differentiate in that. And I do differentiate a little bit in the thing if you just say, oh, just life is a value. I think a good quality life is more valuable too. So to kind of piggyback off your thing, because a lot of these kids don't even get a chance to be kids to branch into what Lupo was saying with it, where, oh, you're not good enough, da 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 da, this and that, and they push that all the time with these children. Look, everybody's got greatness in them. I don't know what the greatness is. I don't know. You might be the best mopper on the planet, whatever it is. You got something that's super neat and unique, and we used to celebrate whatever unique, great thing that every individual person had. We used to celebrate individuality and not try to group up with a bunch of nonsense. And it's not just the church that's filled. It's also the aspect of the degradation of families, no fathers in the households, none of this stuff. Subpar moms are those that go like, yeah, I have one kid, but I just keep getting abortions or whatever. Who cares? Yada, yada, and all this and that. It has a lot to do with the family and the household as well. And not letting kids be kids is very, very impactful on their thing. Introducing some things a little too soon when they're a little young,
I mean, you could eliminate a lot of abortions. Instead of trying to pass heartbeat bills, pass a law that says that a woman has to have an ultrasound and then put a 72-hour waiting period on it.
Like guns?
Right? Like guns. Yeah. You put a 72-hour waiting period on it. How many of those women go home, look at that ultrasound, have 72 hours to consider their decision, and change their mind? I think you would see a drastic decrease in the amount of abortions. And so instead of trying to force through some of these heartbeat bills, I'd love to see them pass. But in a lot of states, they won't. Why not try to pass something like that? Why not try to pass you have to have an ultrasound and there's a 72-hour period that you have to wait?
I guess I'm the idealist on the issue of abortion. I'm like White Rose level, just shut it down, all cases, all the time, every single time, twice on Sunday. That's just me, my position, and that's why I hate politics.
I agree with you, but at the same point, we want to see a reasonable step in the right direction. I think something like that is a reasonable step.
I mean, you never legislate morality or people doing the right thing or being good, and it's always the wrong time to do the right thing, and you're usually just doing an uphill battle by yourself.
I do agree with you.
Of the time.
I do agree with you. You can't legislate morality.
No, and it's not gonna help, baby. Maybe because I always push all these sex ed things in school. Maybe that's part of the sex ed thing, and they show a bunch of sonograms or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the reason why we're promoting homeschool education.
Be better,
It's the reason why we're promoting, fatherhood, because if you look statistically, fathers in the home mean girls don't get pregnant at young ages.
Yeah, but at the same time, the establishment is set up in legislating the family dynamic. They promote divorce and food stamps and welfare and alimony and child support and all this stuff, and it's more financially viable to a mom to not have a dad around. Like, oh, screw working it out. I can just kick back here, get a bunch of change and from 3 facets, and then I can go party all the time.
Yeah, it's a multi-pronged war. We're being attacked from every direction. The enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. He prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. Scripture reminds us that this is a spiritual battle that, we don't fight against flesh and blood, but powers and principalities. We are in the battle of our lives. If you don't know it, then you're not awake and you're not engaged and you're not paying attention. So the reality is that this is going to be won from the bottom up. We're not going to legislate morality, like Jim said. We're only going to be able to change the hearts and minds of the people, because once they ascribe to biblical morality, all these problems disappear overnight. All of them.
Well, it seems like nobody even has dignity no more, man. They just don't even they don't even care about themselves and sell themselves short with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I want to say we're for fathers, which means men, and I want to talk to the men really quickly. If you're a young man, if you're in your early mid-20s or even late 20s, consecrate yourself to the Lord. Give your passions, your lustful desires, all of it over to Him. And then what you're going to end up doing is you're going to become a high-value man. And you're going to buy that fact attract a high value woman, and you guys are going to form a bond that's going to be blessed spiritually by God, and you're going to raise children, and those children are going to live under the cover of their father and their mother, and that family bond is going to be blessed by God, and those children are going to grow in the admonition of the Lord, and they're going to be productive adults and make moral decisions. And that is not necessarily just a religious pitch. That is a statistical pitch. I guarantee you, if you go to the Health and Human Services website, or if you go into ChatGPT or AI and say, what are the chances of children going to prison? What are the chances of children being addicted to fentanyl? If there's a father in the home and a mother in their home, teaching them the word of God and loving each other and loving the kids, I would like to think that it's probably 0.000% of all of the problems that we have in society, the rape, the pedophilia, the abortion problem, the all the men that are in prison. I think I read something like 80+% of men that are in prison never had a father. I mean, you would clean out the jails if men came home and started raising their sons. I mean, this is really simple. We got to remember the foundation of all of this. It goes back to biblical morality.
Well, this isn't the last you're going to hear on this topic, but it's the last we're going to hear today. Join us every day on YouTube or Rumble, Full Armor Media Group or Spiritual Insurgency. Look it up. See you tomorrow.
Peace.
God bless.
This better be better.